In this math tutorial video, I'll be talking about number sequences. So let's begin. If I give you an example of a list of number 0, 1, 2, 3, alright? This is what I call an example of a number sequence. Firstly, why is it called a number sequence? This number obviously is in sequence, right? So for number sequence, each number we call it a term. So in this case, I start with the number 0, right? So my number 0 is my first term, right? Number 1 is my second term. Number 2 is my third term. And lastly, number 3 is my fourth term. So students, if you have more numbers in the number sequence, so obviously you have to write the fifth term, sixth term, seventh term, so on and so forth, alright? So in this case, if I ask you, what do I do to get from the first term to the second term? In this easy example, I think all of you can agree with me that to get from the first term to the second term, I add 1, right? Same goes for the other, alright? So in this chapter, alright, it's good for you to come up with a specific rule, alright? We call it the specific rule. What is this specific rule is all about? So example, in this number sequence, alright, I start to begin by writing, I begin with 0, right? Then I add positive 1 to each term to get to the next term. Okay, as easy as that. So try to do a specific rule for each and every question for number sequence. You will not go wrong, right? So for me in this chapter, alright, there is a few problem solving tips for every question. So for firstly, please note that for first term to the second term and so on and so forth, there is a constant value whether you add, you subtract, you multiply, or you divide. Alright, so let's look at another example. What if I give you this number sequence? 1, negative 1, positive 1, negative 1. It did not have to start with 0. You can start with any number, but please take note what is that digit and what is the last digit. Okay, so in this case, 1, negative 1, positive 1, negative 1. So what should I do to get from the first term to the second term, to the third term, to the fourth term? Always remember, there must be a constant value from the first term to the second term, third term, and the fourth term. So in this example, right, from 1 to negative 1, what should I do? I, alright, multiply by negative 1. Okay, because 1 multiplied by negative 1, I get negative 1. Similarly, once you get the first constant term correctly done, alright, it goes the same for every term. So in this case, for the second term to go to the third term, again I multiply by negative 1. So please check whether this term, alright, this constant term that you multiply or you add or you divide or you subtract is correct for each and every term. Again, the specific rule for this example here is I begin with 1, right? Then you don't add, right? You multiply. Alright, you multiply by negative 1 to each term to get to the next term. Okay, so let me try and use an example from your textbook. Okay, in your textbook, alright, there is this example. Let's try 2, 5, 6, 1, 2, 8, 64, 32, and lastly 16. So how many terms are there in this number sequence? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are 5 terms in this number sequence. Let's take a few seconds. Let's see what is the pattern here from the first term to the second term. What should I do? Right? To get 256, right? From 1 to 8. Or the other way around. How to get 1 to 8 from 256. For some of you who are very quick with your numbers, you can see that 1 to 8 is exactly half of 256. So let's try. Let's just put -2. Alright? So 1 to 8, is it to get 64? Do I divide by 2? Let's check with a scientific calculator. Yes, I do get 64 if I divide 2 from 1 to 8. So similarly, right? So in this number sequence, to get from the first term to the second term and the following terms, I divide by 2 for each term to get to the next term. So what is my specific rule? I begin with 256, then I divide, right? I divide I divide by 2 to each term to get to the next term. Okay, so as a recap, firstly, identify how many terms in the number sequence, right? Step number 2, right? Identify what is the constant term for me to get from the first term to the second term to get to the third term, and most importantly, number 3, come up with a specific rule. Right? This specific rule will guide you through so that you can eradicate any careless mistakes. Happy learning.